health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Hello, welcome to 5 to Thrive Live, a podcast about thriving for those who have been affected by cancer and chronic disease. I'm Dr. Lisa Schuler, and I co-host with my good friend Carolyn Gazella. You can find all of our past show podcasts on every major podcast outlet and our schedule on ithriveplan.com. And tonight, I'm very excited to be talking with Roy Upton about the global natural medicine movement. Roy Upton has been working as an herbalist since 1981. He's trained in Ayurvedic, Chinese, and Western herbal traditions. Roy is the founder, executive director, and editor of the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia, co-founder and past president of the American Herbalist Guild, and is an advisor to many organizations, including the United States Pharmacopoeia, the American Herbal Products Association, American Botanical Council, University of California, Santa Cruz, Sonoran University, Institute of Benkao Gangmu in Beijing, and the Tehran University of Medical Sciences. Roy is also the founder of the Global Alliance for Integrative Health and Medicine, which is a global initiative to cultivate a unified voice for natural health care. Now, before we start the conversation with Roy, I want to thank our sponsors, Cetria, which is a patented form of glutathione, clinically proven to raise blood glutathione levels. Glutathione is a master antioxidant, the body's primary defense against free radicals, and you can learn more at cetriaglutathione.com. We also thank ProThrivers Wellness Supplements, including ProThrivers Wellness Brain, a product specifically for thrivers that contains cognizin for memory, focus, and attention, as well as some other brain-supporting nutrients and herbs. And you can find this through your healthcare practitioner or on pureformulas.com. And finally, Dr. Ohhira's Probiotics, a best-selling probiotic for over 30 years, which contains 12 probiotic strains, which are shelf-stable without refrigeration due to a unique 3-year fermentation process. And you can learn more at drohhiraprobiotics.com. And hello, Roy. Welcome to 5 to Thrive Live.
Hi, Lise. Pleasure to hear from you.
Well, I'm excited to talk with you about this important topic because you are really quite an expert. You've spent decades studying and practicing herbal and traditional medicine around the world and traditions from around the world. So how do you define natural medicine in today's healthcare landscape?
I think in my mind, natural medicine is most of the things we can first do ourselves, but two, the things that we can do prior to having to subject ourselves to more dangerous interventions like pharmaceutical medications or surgical interventions. So it's whatever we can do, or that, for example, from whether it's a naturopathic physician or a TCM, acupuncture practitioner, functional medicine practitioner, what can we do that's as least invasive of an option prior to going to more dangerous options? And specifically, my area of expertise, a specialty is botanical medicine. So that's what I hang my hat on most of the time when I'm talking about natural medicine or nutrition or mind-body medicine.
Yeah, I like that definition quite a bit. And I, too, love botanical medicine, as you know. So many people actually are surprised to learn that over 80% of the world's population relies on some form of traditional medicine for some aspect of their primary health care. So, this is around the world. So what can the U.S. learn from that? Because that's not necessarily the case across the entire U.S. population.
No, not at all. I mean, you and I live in bubbles. I live in Santa Cruz. Actually, I'm not sure where you live these days, but Arizona, right? So we're surrounded by natural healthcare practitioners, and we're in that world. But when you travel to Nebraska, Alabama, you don't have that access in the same way that we do here or that we do in our lives. I thought about this question a little bit. I'm not sure that the system of medicine in the U.S. actually can learn, because it's so inundated with high tech medicine, versus focusing on prevention or focusing on less invasive interventions first. And we're so commercially oriented and so specialty oriented, that inherently brings with it a high level of technicality and expense. And this is one of the sad parts, of my recent experiences in working with or participating in the World Health Organization Global Summit on Traditional Medicine. There was very little U.S. Participation, and it's been like that for decades. So from a systems perspective, I'm not sure that the system can actually learn, because it's really, there's too many impediments, but the people can learn. And that's my mission, as to how can we get more people demanding access, first by, taking the self-care measures that they can, and then knowing that they have options like naturopathic physicians or Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, functional medicine, lifestyle medicine, integrative medicine, the whole, kind of cup of soup that natural medicine encompasses. Most people don't know they have legitimate options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love how you put it squarely back into the hands of the people, because I think that's really the beauty of natural medicine, as you said in your first comments, that it really is about prevention, and it's about people taking some degree of responsibility for their own health, but really just being given the tools that they need to do that well. And, this is a country that needs it. We have one of the highest healthcare costs of any country in the world, and yet we have some of the poorest health outcomes. And so I believe natural medicine definitely has a role in reversing that trend, and I'm curious what your comments are in that regard.
Yeah, but it's not just you and I that have that opinion, Lise. This was loudly proclaimed at the WHO Global Summit in 2023, and then reiterated again at the second Global Summit in 2025. Basically, 85% of the conditions that we suffer from these days are not, in the past, they were infectious diseases and abject starvation. Like when we were growing up, we always heard about starving children in India or Bangladesh or places like that. That's and infectious diseases. And that's been more well controlled, due to better food distribution, food production, as well as sanitation. So now 85% of what we develop because of behavior, because of lifestyle, chronic diseases, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, in overall. And so there's no drug for that. And most natural medicine strategies, Chinese, Ayurvedic, naturopathy, they maintained a very strong relationship, between lifestyle, diet, stress, and the development of disease. And we counsel our patients, at least I believe you do as well as I do, is that we counsel our patients to change their lives. We don't just condition them to take a pill. Most of our society has been conditioned to take a pill, not to take responsibility. And that's a problem. But let's look at just one area. You said we have the poorest outcomes, which we do. We have the highest infant and highest maternal mortality of any country. And that means we allow more of our babies and new mothers to die in the first year of their life than virtually every other similarly developed nation. That's appalling. And in this country, the majority of births are physician-attended births. But when you look at the countries that have the lowest infant and maternal mortality rates, they have among the highest incidence of midwife-delivered births. And so that's just a low-hanging fruit statistic that if we just shifted our mentality from looking at the birthing process as being an emergency requiring high-tech interventions and turn it back over to the women that have always done it, the midwives, our infant and maternal mortality rates would plummet, would go down almost immediately. But here we have that 35% of our hospitals don't have obstetrics units in them. And so that's appalling in and of itself. So that's just one way that natural medicine therapies can reduce healthcare or improve health outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful example, because for that to happen, for that shift to go back to midwifery, that means that society has to rediscover their trust in their own innate healing process and their ability, in this case, to bring a new birth into the world without technology. So I think really, honestly, at the core of this sort of disenfranchisement from natural health and natural medicine is a growing lack of trust in our own healing capacity and the capacity of the nature around us to support that inherent healing. And until we bridge that, I don't know if we can really get back to where we can see these tremendous changes in our health and outcomes.
Yeah, I'm not sure it has to be either or, though, Lise, because, for example, the birthing example is a perfect example. In hospitals in Austria, 90% of the deliveries are done by midwives in the hospitals. That means they all have all the technical resources that they need if something goes wrong. But, in Austria, I think it was in like the lowest 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 lowest infant mortality rates, with 90% of their babies delivered by midwives in hospitals. So I don't think it has to be completely or instead of technology. It could be both, but it's a mindset. It definitely is a mindset that does go to that trust of the human body to both heal itself as well as to healthfully deliver a baby without a cesarean section, unless it's absolutely needed to save a life.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that point up, because just as to reiterate what you just said in a slightly different context, at Sonoran University of Health Sciences, where we have naturopathic medicine as our doctoral program and master's programs in nutrition from a whole person perspective, mental health counseling, we are embracing artificial intelligence or artificial technology, digital technology, as much as we can in our operations and even in our curriculum. And yet here we are teaching nature-based healing. So that seems like opposite. But in our view, we're utilizing the advances of technology, but making sure we guide that usage with the wisdom of nature and in the principles and the core belief of the natural principles of healing. So I agree with you 100%. It definitely is a both and situation, not an either or.
Yeah.
So, so let's sort of stay on this theme a little bit. And one of the things that I hear all the time, I'm sure you've heard it for all of your tenure in this field too, is that there's no scientific evidence for anything that natural medicine does. So how do you respond to that?
Well, first off, even though we do hear that question all the time, the premise upon which it's based is false, because it implies that there's scientific validation for what's done in Western medicine, and nothing can be further from the truth. I think you probably remember, Lise, about 30 years or 25 years ago, there was a survey done of how much of Western medicine was evidence-based. It was done, I forget the group who did it, but it was like a little bit more than 25% that was really scientifically based. And if you look at Cochrane reviews, for example, about Cochrane evidence-based reviews. They're the most critical evidence-based reviews on the planet. And in many of the therapeutic strategies employed by Western medicine, they don't meet a high level of scientific rigor. So the bigger probably testimony. Are you familiar with Marcia Engel, who was the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine for about 27 years?
Right. Yes.
She's a professor of ethics in medicine at Harvard University now, but she was the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, 20 plus years, 25 years, arguably one of the most experienced insiders in that world. And she came to the conclusion that there's very little within scientific Western medicine research that can be trusted because of the commercialism that drives medical research, medical education, and medical policy. And she went even so far to say that we couldn't even trust the opinions of our scientific or medical authorities because they're all following the same line. Not necessarily, they don't realize necessarily that what they're saying is not scientifically founded. They believe it is. But when you actually look at it and put it under a microscope with scientific rigor, it doesn't hold up. But the second part of that, Lisa, is in 2000, FDA convened a conference, an herbal conference in Washington, D.C. Probably 1,000 people were there. Everybody was talking about evidence, no evidence, no evidence, no evidence. There was a guy from FASB, the Federation for the Society of Experimental Biology, and NIH. And he took the microphone and he said, I don't know anything about herbal medicine, but before I came to this conference, I just wanted to get a view of the landscape of herbal medicine research. So I did a PubMed research, and I found over 200,000 clinical research papers on botanical medicine. He said that is not an insignificant amount of evidence. That was in 2000, Lise. Botanical medicine research has exploded, since then, well over probably, several hundred thousand, if not over a million, clinical as well as preclinical research. That's a huge amount of scientific evidence. And what his point was that at NIH, National Institutes of Health, they would take bodies of information like that and subject them to what were called consensus forums. And then they would look at the strength of the clinical research, the strength of the preclinical research, whether or not there was mechanistic plausibility, biological plausibility, and come up with an expert opinion of whether or not you should use lemon balm, for example, for mild anxiety. And that's never been done in this country. But the point being is that, one, what exists in Western medicine is not all scientifically valid. And there's a tremendous amount of scientific evidence that would allow us to have better informed choices about botanical medicine.
Yes. And I would be very surprised if the number of published research trials just on botanicals, never mind all in the millions by now. I mean, the explosion that you referred to is a real thing. So much more research, which is, wonderful to see. So let's talk a little bit about access, because this is a challenge. It's a challenge economically, especially in the United States, when a lot of these natural health care options are not covered by insurance. It's a challenge geographically, as you noted earlier, and even legally for naturopathic medicine, for example, only 26 states. So, it's over half, but still almost half of the country does not even regulate naturopathic medicine. So there's definite barriers to access. And so I'm wondering if you could outline the next critical steps to improving access. What would they be?
I think the first is that we haven't done our job well enough. And I say we from the bigger natural healthcare sector have not done our job well enough to articulate the benefits of what we do. Naturopathic medicine, as you said, okay, that's available in 26 states. Interestingly, Chinese medicine is pretty much available in every state because it wasn't viewed as being a competition to Western medicine in the same way that naturopathy is. Also, there wasn't as much infighting in the Chinese medicine world as there seems to be in other disciplines of natural medicine. So I believe that we have to get our house in order from a marketing perspective, as well as we already have the education foundation is already there. But from a marketing perspective, we really haven't expressed and articulated what the benefits of naturopathic medicine are. Here's something interesting that you might like to hear. I met a woman many years ago who was a medical doctor, conventional medical doctor, and she decided to also study naturopathy. And so she went to Bastyr University in Seattle at the time, and she chose not to waive any of her pre-med requirements. She wanted to go through the entire training program again, just to see how they taught it. She felt that the naturopathic medicine program at Bastyr was tougher than her conventional medical training, and she believed that they were trying to overcompensate, because some people don't look at, is naturopathic medicine really medicine? Well, at least this one person's opinion, a conventional medical doctor, her training in naturopathy was much more rigorous than it was in Western medicine. And so we still suffer from an inferiority complex as a profession. We've continued to allow ourselves to be marginalized in mainstream medicine. Here's one of the other little factoids, right? Acupuncture is approved for on the Medicare for things like lower back pain or knee pain and things like that. But then they prohibit acupuncturists from doing it. They require Western physicians to administer the acupuncture. How's that work? A physician can go do a Chinese medicine training program in a weekend or a couple of weeks and get a certificate that says they're a medical acupuncturist, then be able to get reimbursed for treating a patient with acupuncture. But an acupuncturist who literally was trained for 6 years doesn't have that same right.
Right.
That's a legal issue that requires probably legal action, because it's a restraint of trade from a profession being able to perform their professional duties for which they are duly licensed and trained. And so we haven't gotten our house in order. We haven't built our political network to be strong enough. We haven't built our consumer network to be strong enough to prevent prohibitions or restrictions like that from happening. That has to change.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many issues and so many ways in which we are our own worst enemy, of course. And I'm speaking collectively of the natural medicine movement and professions therein. And there are legitimate forces arrayed against us, which makes the challenge even more difficult. So who's got this right? Which country you've studied a lot, you're on global panels, which countries or regions have really done a good job of integrating natural medicine into their public or their overall health system?
I think China and India are the two best models for full systems of medicine and their integration. And I take that back, not so much their integration least, but as their access. So for example, I was in India about 5 years ago. A guy behind me starts talking to me, hands me his business card, and it says like Ayurvedic hospital or something on it, right? And I'm like, oh, you run an Ayurvedic hospital? He says, oh, we have a system like Kaiser. I said, like, how many hospitals do you have? And he's like, 127. Wow. I'm like, you have 127 Ayurvedic medical hospitals? He said, yes. I'm like, my God, that's amazing. It's incredible. And then, when I studied Chinese medicine in Shanghai University of Traditional Chinese Medicine in Shanghai. And I practiced in two different hospitals. One was an integrated Western Chinese hospital. The other one was I was in a traditional Chinese medicine ward. In the first one, all high tech. They were doing injectable herbal formulas into acupuncture points, and they had all the bells and whistles, MRIs. And then I go over to the more traditional department at Longmore Hospital in Shanghai, and we strictly did acupuncture. They didn't integrate herbal medicine with it or Western medicine. A patient can choose what they wanted, what type of therapy they wanted. And sometimes I would say, oh, I would be interested if they, if we had a bacterial catch on this, somebody that seemingly had a urinary tract infection. And they would say, well, if you want to order a catch, a bacterial test, we'll send them downstairs and see if they have a UTI. Or I would say, oh, I would be inclined to prescribe this botanical medicine. And they would say, well, if you would like to, you may, and we'll send them down to the herbal department to get their herbal medicine. So it wasn't fully integrated, but it was fully accessible. And all of it, Lise, was equally reimbursable and covered under the healthcare system. Here's a neat one that I learned in 2023 when I was at the WHO conference in India, that physicians a patient in Bhutan, when they go to the hospital, they see a Western doctor and a traditional Bhutanese doctor at the same time, same intake. And then the two of them discuss what the best course of treatment is for that particular patient at that particular point in their life, or the patient can choose, well, I kind of prefer Bhutanese over Western, or I prefer Western over Bhutanese. And the kicker, Lise, the doctors get paid the exact same amount, whether they were traditional or conventional. So this is what's happening in the rest of the world. And the U.S. is so far behind that it's not even funny.
Yeah. Well, as you know, our U.S. healthcare system is imploding as we speak in lots of ways. On the provider side, patient experience is getting increasingly challenged. The cost is out of control. So, the necessity is the mother of invention. And we may see, I'm going to be optimistic here, we may in our lifetime see more integration and more openness, if for no other reason out of desperation for a system that's really not working well. I hope we go to China and to India and Bhutan to see how it can be done differently. Yeah. That would be pretty amazing. So I'm wondering, just before we get there in my utopian world, how do you advise individuals who want to start to just build this for themselves? How do you advise them to go about doing that?
Self-education. I mean, we have the ability to educate ourselves like we've never had before. Now, of course, there's both high quality and poor quality information that's available online, but there are a lot of high quality sources for information. I mean, any of the naturopathic organizations and schools, Andy Weil's integrative medicine program down there where you are in Arizona. There's so many good, even sites like WebMD and even NIH sometimes have semi-decent information, but more information for how we can take better responsibility for our own lives. That's the first thing. Second thing, of course, we have to give focus to prevention over interventions long-term. That's where the best savings will come, is if we stop subsidizing, the production of corn for high fructose corn syrup, and stop subsidizing childhood obesity and adult obesity, and make changes like that. But in my world, both self-responsibility and education are really the two primary things that we have to engage in if we want to change healthcare in the U.S.
Yeah, good enough. So I think we're almost out of time, but I would love for you to give us some final thoughts. And if you could include in your final thoughts just anything about what gives you hope about the future integration of natural medicine into our mainstream healthcare system.
I think the thing that gives me the most hope, Lise, is that when I came back from WHO, I founded this Global Alliance for Integrative Health and Medicine, which is easy to find. The website for that, just www.gaihm.org. And everybody throughout the world, China, India, Iran, all throughout the US, Canada, everybody that I've presented this idea that we need to break through our silos, that we have to work collaboratively, stop working separately, and develop unified goals, have loved this idea. They say, yes, it's time to do that. We have communication like we've never had before. We have the ability to collaborate across borders like we never had before. So now is the time that we could do it. We could do it much easier than when we were, just pushing paper, just 20 years ago. So the idea of developing collaborations across borders, and engaging people, engaging consumer advocacy groups, as well as a myriad of the natural healthcare practitioner organizations behind single focus strategies like naturopathy. We would ask, what are the primary things we have to do to advance naturopathy, functional medicine, integrative medicine, midwifery birth, herbal medicine? What are the things? Botany, chemistry, natural products research. What should be our top priorities? Women's health, children's health. And if we can identify those collectively, the bigger we can identify those collectively, then we can identify, okay, who's best to work on this particular bucket, this particular part of the story. Who's best to forward the naturopathic agenda and the herbal medicine the agenda, the women's health agenda. What gives me the most hope is that everybody that I've brought this kind of vision to has said, yes, this is what we need to do. So my fingers are crossed.
My fingers are crossed with you. So for those of you who didn't catch that, the website is GAIHM.org, and that stands for the Global Alliance for Integrative Health and Medicine. Well, Roy, thank you so much for being on 5 to Thrive Live, and I appreciate all that you have done and continue to do in this arena. You are just such an advocate, such a legacy for all of this, so I really want to thank you from my heart. And that wraps up this episode of 5 to Thrive Live, and so I also want to thank our sponsors once more: ProThrivers Wellness Brain Formula, Cetra Glutathione, Superior Glutathione to support liver and immune health, and Dr. O'Here's award-winning shelf-stable probiotic. And thank you, listener, for joining us. May you experience joy, laughter, and love. It's time to thrive, everyone. Have a great night.